Damarys, welcome to the Rethink podcast.
Thank you.
A great recovery from the COVID pandemic would have helped countries to build back better while driving economic growth and job creation. But the latest renewables reports paint a different picture. Transition that the world had hoped for is simply not happening. So let's start with this. Why do you think we missed this opportunity despite the existing technology and the reduced cost that came with it?
I believe that, in nature, humans don't like change. We went through so much change that, the people who are more comfortable with disruption is to happen, right? And I know some people don't necessarily like the word disruption. Disruption needs to happen for the better, which is really evolution. And I think that some people maybe were overwhelmed with the disruption that was happening on the planet already, and weren't willing to, continue to ride that wave into doing something better. That's, of course, some generalizations. There are some folks and some groups who did, think this was the right time to apply technology, to take that risk. I mean, we basically risked all of our lives, even just in the world we were living in with COVID. So why not, risk the things that will perhaps enable us to turn the page over to a better opportunity, in order to implement technologies that are available, that the creators of these technologies have imagined and brought through to reality, and they've risked it before. So why not join that and be able to do that? So I think, it's a little bit of a fear mechanism that was still there for some.
But what are the risks of delaying the energy transition?
Oh, that's such a good question. Again, I think that some people, the incumbent is so much easier. And at the end of the day, it boils down to two things. So something needs to inspire people for that change. And that inspiration, it really is one of two things. Number one, there has to be a reward. There has to be a greater give to the people. So there has to be something for them to gain. And so I think that communication aspect needs to be put out in a more succinct way so that people know that they have something to win, whether it's, monetary, or, maybe they're the first and they have the first and cool factor. So it has to be either a win or a loss, a consequence. And that usually would be driven by policy. And unfortunate, for most people, it will take, a policy change. So things like carbon tax credits or carbon tax action, pardon me. Either you get taxed or you get a credit. And that's, at the end of the day, what it is going to boil down. I know some regions in the world are not in this, carbon tax mechanism yet, but it is a very real mechanism. Whether we like it or not, it is coming. It is already implemented in various countries, for example, in Europe and North America, and the rest of the world will follow in one form or another.
I think it's important to mention that the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26 last year, we saw a number of important commitments, including the UAE roadmap to net zero by 2050. And the Middle East is now at the heart of the energy transition conversation, with COP27 taking place in Egypt this year and COP28, the UAE next year. So which industries do you think could have the greatest impact by transitioning to more renewable energy sources?
I think all of them will. All of them, absolutely all of them. So I know you and I talked before with regards to my aversion to energy transition. Transition to me indicates something must die and something must be born. And that is absolutely incorrect. I believe that we need to evolve. And the future of energy, as passionate as I am about it, has to be an energy mix. And so that said, we need to take a look at, often these goals are, really sometimes it's a wish list. Net zero by, right? Net zero by 2050, for example, or others are more aggressive, net zero by 2040. I mean, really, you only have a few years to get there. Some of them are even as aggressive as 2030. or have some type of metrics to get there by that. What I don't see the metrics being is, back to your first question, both organizations and governments and people need to be inspired to take a look at that number and also take a look at how do we get there? What are the things that I can do as a person in my home? How do I teach my children? That's a personal level. But corporates need to really, really not push, but encourage and mandate that humans within the organizations, all organizations are still run by humans, take a risk within their portfolio to be able to implement these technologies today. Okay, we're not going to go crazy and just install and try everything, but I know that there are some corporates that really pride themselves on integration of technology. So that is what needs to happen as a catalyst on an everyday basis to get us there. All these events, COP26, COP27 in Egypt, and then COP28 next year in the UAE, are stages for this. Does everybody make it to that stage? Probably not. Most likely not. There's innovation happening in places that we don't know. And that is what takes work. That's part of what the strategy does. That's part of what Ignite is trying to provide access to all humans to be able to take a look at these technologies at various different levels so that we can start to implement within our day-to-day.
Let's discuss about the digital technologies and the role of the digital technologies in supporting sustainable business model innovation. How do you think AI can be a powerful tool in fighting climate change, for example?
Yeah, on the metrics, I think the rulers need to be much quicker, much more accessible, and companies and organizations and people need to know what is it that they're implementing, whether it's hardware or behavioral based changes that can get them to that net zero. So how am I decarbonizing every day? How is this company implementing technology to decarbonize? And how do we actually measure that movement of the needle? Those are the key pieces where I believe we've missed a little bit of the opportunity to converge both hardware, right? So non-digital technologies and digital technologies. So for example, if you take a look at, I'm building a building and I want it to be net zero. So I'm going to incorporate different technologies such as net zero clean cement. I'm going to have windows that have solar technology in them integrated. So building integrated photovoltaic. I'm going to have pavement integrated photovoltaic. I'm going to have power reduction systems, which will control all of my air systems, for example. So many different technologies that are ready now to be scaled. Okay, so we go and do that. But then, how do we know that if I didn't put those things in there, what is my baseline? So we need to start to measure baseline on not just each building by building, but the aggregate. So what does Dubai, for example, have for a carbonization footprint and a building footprint? What does Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, or London, England, or New York City, or Vancouver, Canada? All of these cities that have a mandate need to start to think like that. Municipalities need to be able to request and be able, and so again, it boils down to policy and reporting. And so these types of reporting mechanisms, not only are they lend themselves quite nicely to AI, but also give us a global leadership data where others can follow. So countries who do have a net zero mandate should be using tools and integrating tools such as AI to be able to show that movement of the needle, capture that data, have an open source platform that globally shows, because it will come down to that. Each country globally will have its responsibility, because if one is really a big emitter and the other one is a net zero or a negative carbon output, which is amazing, then how do we balance that, right? It's not fair that one gets penalized, that everybody gets penalized the same when one is actually really putting in an effort and other ones are not. And so AI, I think, lends itself to really that measuring tool and that data capture that we all need to look at ourselves in the mirror and see, this is where we're at today, and maybe I'm not so pretty, and so maybe I need to fix my hair a little bit, right? Or things like that, so I can get to the best that we can be. And those are the items where we need to really, really look inside, and it takes time. It's, you know, sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do, and we know, but we do know how we have to do it, and there are tools that will help us get there.
Now, I know that enabling inclusion and inspiring diversity is deeply in your DNA, because you co-founded Women in Energy, Women in Blockchain, and you also are involved in the future and of energy and youth education program. And you also mentioned Ignite Fund, a woman-led fund. What is the status of women's participation in the energy sector or in the business industry in general? How would you like to take this subject to move on with our discussion?
Oh, you know, when there was a group of us, of course, that got together in oil and gas way back when, been working for too long. You know, we were catching up to the males, our male counterparts. When I started in energy sector, specifically in oil and gas, women were, you know, regarded as the secretary, even though some of them had master's degrees, right? And PhDs and so on. And so, you know, it was really unfair. And I remember thinking back, it's really quite something. The positive thing is we've come a long ways. Calgary Women in Energy still standing, a great group who actually involves not just, you know, each other, supports each other, augments education for all members. Also does a lot with the community, which is very typical of women. Women on the planet were 51% of the human population. So, you know, when we look at companies to fund, for example, when I look at investing my own money, and I look at a leadership board on a deck that's all male, I love men. I love my husband, my, you know, business partners. I love these men because they really, really support everybody into the mix. But when I see a leadership, a board or a leadership C-suite that is all male, I actually feel bad for them because they're missing out a complete 51% of the human population in their take in that technology, their take in how this should be grown globally, etc. O'Leary from the Dragon's Den, which is a very famous North American show, just put out an article talking about how I believe it was 90% of the companies that he's made the most money out of are women-led. So that's really interesting. Women just work really hard. We're very much around community. We have an all-inclusive approach to how we treat companies. And so instead of saying, hey, you know, I did this, it's we did this. Instead of just honoring the me, and I'm not saying all males are like that, but that tendency does exist. They really honor the people that help them get there. So, you know, it's not a leadership of I'm in the front and you're in the back, is we're all here together. So I believe that, you know, these pieces of, you know, women in energy, women in blockchain, which I brought the group together, and before I moved to Europe, I passed it on, and I know that they're doing a great job leading that. And there's several groups that have, you know, come into that space now. And the blockchain aspect for me was more, before we have to catch up to them, to our male counterparts, let's just be at the table if we choose to, right? If we choose to stay home and have a family, that's fine too. But we should always have that choice to be at the table, because the table just simply is not complete if we are one-sided. And that really is what it boils down to. Industries and countries are doing much more to be more inclusive. We all have our capacities, our failures and our wins, but we need to come together to be able to augment the things that we're good at, because we really all are trying to drive to the same goal. And if we miss out, we really miss out if we're not holistic in our approach.
Damarys, it was such an inspiring discussion, and I hope to see you again soon at the Rethink podcast. Thank you so much for your presence.
Thank you. Be well.